Wait a minute, don't switch away. I know what you're thinking. Another conspiracy theory about Hollywood and secret agencies. No, this story is much stranger than any conspiracy because it's about chaos. It's about how a film that shouldn't have existed became a box office hit, spawned a franchise, and became a cultural phenomenon, all by pure chance. A chain of ridiculous coincidences, mistakes, and decisions made by people who had no idea what they were doing. Let's go back to the early 80s. Hollywood was in its muscle era. Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Chuck Norris. Studios churned out action films featuring invincible guys with guns. The formula was embarrassingly simple. Take a big guy, give him a weapon, and place him against an army of villains. The audience pays, the studio counts the money. Everyone's happy. And then, in this assembly line, a script appears that no one takes seriously. Brothers Jim and John Thomas wrote a story under the working title The Hunter. The idea, according to them, came from a joke. After the release of Rocky IV, a joke floated around Hollywood. Rocky Balboa had defeated everyone on Earth. His next opponent could only be an alien. The Thomases laughed. Then they thought, what if we took it seriously? What if we put a typical action hero against something that doesn't play by human rules? The script was rough. The dialogue was wooden. The plot was as thin as paper. But one thing hooked people. The feeling that the usual genre rules were breaking down. The hero with a gun was no longer in control. And this small inversion, born from a silly joke, set off an avalanche. The script landed on the desk of producer Joel Silver, the same Silver who would later gift the world Die Hard and The Matrix. But at that moment, Silver was looking for a project for Schwarzenegger, something simple, reliable, commercial. The Hunter seemed like a suitable option. A military unit in the jungle, gunfire, explosions, everything by the book. Silver wasn't planning a revolution. He aimed to profit. But the project, meant to be a standard B-grade action flick, began to mutate from day one. If you enjoy stories about how brilliant mistakes change the industry, subscribe to the channel. We cover this regularly. Fox took on the project. Schwarzenegger signed the contract. And then the circus began, which would later be cited in film production lectures as an example of what not to do. They appointed John McTiernan as the director, young, ambitious, at that time almost without a track record in big cinema. His previous film, Nomads, failed so quietly that most people in the industry didn't even know it existed. Why did the studio trust him with a project starring Arnold? Because he was cheap. That was the genius plan. McTiernan arrived on set in Mexico and discovered that everything was going wrong. The heat was unbearable, the crew was getting sick.
The jungle turned out to be not a picturesque backdrop, but a hostile environment that devoured equipment, people, and the budget. Arnold and other actors, Carl Weathers, Jesse Ventura, Bill Duke, were losing weight from dehydration and intestinal infections. The conditions were so harsh that part of the team began to seriously doubt, should they even finish this film? And then, the Predator, or rather the first version of the Predator, what was supposed to be the film's main villain, the alien costume. Its original design looked bad, really bad. Imagine a giant insect with a silly head where the actor could barely move. The suit was so heavy that the person inside stumbled with every step. Filming a convincing scene in it was physically impossible. The studio spent money. Time was lost. The result was a disaster. Stop. Here's where the story takes a turn that few consider. The failure of the first costume wasn't a setback. It was a serendipitous accident that saved the film. Because if the first design had worked, Predator would have remained an average action movie with a B monster. We would have forgotten it a week after its release. But the suit failed, and the producers were forced to find a replacement. Let's say they turned to Stan Winston. By that time, Winston was already working on the Terminator and Aliens. He was one of the best practical effects masters. And here's the legend told in various ways, but the essence remains. Winston was flying on a plane next to James Cameron. They were discussing the creature design problem. Cameron, by the way, just in casual conversation, tossed out the line that he always wanted to see a monster with mandibles, those claw-like jaws. Winston latched onto this idea. He started sketching right there on the flight. The iconic look of the predator, the dreadlocks, the mandibles, the mask, was born from a random conversation on a plane, not from a brainstorming session, not from a focus group, just casual chatter. Jean-Claude Van Damme, by the way, was supposed to play the Predator in the first failed costume. Yes, that Van Damme. He was hired because he was flexible and could move in heavy gear better than other stuntmen. But the job turned out to be hell. It was unbearably hot inside the costume, visibility was zero, and breathing was difficult. Depending on the account, Van Damme either left on his own, was fired, or the suit was simply scrapped along with his participation. The details vary. The fact is, the future action star left the project before they started filming the monster seriously. The new Predator was played by Kevin Peter Hall, standing at 7 feet and 3 inches tall. He was a basketball player, not a professional actor. They hired him solely for his height, and he turned out to be a brilliant choice. His movements gave the creature that inhuman grace, that sense of predatory, calculated strength that couldn't be portrayed by the computer graphics of the time.
Another lucky break that turned to gold. But let's get back to the chaos on set. McTiernan, a young director without experience managing large shoots, found himself in a situation where everything was falling apart at once. The budget was cracking, the schedule was slipping, the special effects weren't working. Schwarzenegger, according to participants, was unhappy with the script and demanded rewrites. The actors were improvising, and some of the most memorable lines in the film came not from the script, but from desperation. Remember the scene where Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers shake hands, the famous shot with bulging biceps? That moment became a meme, an icon, a symbol. It wasn't scripted. The actors were just goofing off between takes, and McTiernan saw something real in it and kept it. That's how cult moments are born, not by design, but against the odds. And what about the CIA theme in the title of this video? Here's where it gets even more interesting than you think, but not in the direction you might expect. The plot of Predator revolves around a group of special forces sent on a mission by the CIA into the Central American jungle. Carl Weathers' character, Dylan, a CIA agent, lures Dutch's team, played by Schwarzenegger, into a mission under false pretenses. The film clearly states your government is lying to you. Your commanders are using you as disposable material. The mission is a lie. It was the mid-'80s. The Iran-Contra scandal was still hot in the news. The real CIA was indeed conducting covert operations in Central America, funding rebels, orchestrating coups, acting outside the law. Congress was investigating. The press was digging. Let's just say society was shocked. And then comes a film where the CIA is the antagonist, sacrificing its people for geopolitical interests. Coincidence? Of course, but a coincidence so precise that it worked as a mirror. The screenwriters didn't plan for political commentary. They just wanted to give the characters a reason to be in the jungle. The CIA and a secret mission were standard tropes in action films of that era. But the context of the time turned this genre cliché into a resonant statement. Audiences watched Predator and saw a reflection of what they were reading in the newspapers. The film struck a nerve of the era, accidentally. There was no funding from the CIA, no hidden messages from the secret agencies. There was just Fox Studios, producer silver, the budget, deadlines, and a young director trying not to sink. The truth was more mundane and paradoxically more captivating than any conspiracy theory, because the real story of Predator is about a group of people who, not fully understanding what they were creating, accidentally assembled a masterpiece from the fragments of failure. Now, let's talk money. Who profited from this chaos?
Schwarzenegger earned a fee that solidified his status as one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors.
The film, with a modest budget by Hollywood standards, raked in a worldwide box office that far exceeded its costs. But the real money came later through the franchise, sequels, crossovers with Alien, video games, comics, merchandising. The image of the Predator became intellectual property, generating income for decades. And here's the telling part. The people who created this image, Stan Winston and his team, earned disproportionately less compared to the studio. Winston got paid for his work. The studio got the franchise. This is the classic model of Hollywood, and it hasn't changed since. Those who own the rights take it all. Those who create with their hands get paid and receive thanks in the credits. A rookie mistake. The Thomas brothers sold the script. They got paid, but they couldn't foresee the scale of what would grow from their idea. Well, this happens repeatedly in the industry. The authors of the original concept find themselves sidelined when the machine starts printing profits. Not because someone is malicious, but because the contract was signed at a stage when no one believed in great success, when the project was just another action flick with a questionable monster in a failed costume. A parallel to business? It's direct. Startups that take off are often not the ones with the perfect plan, but those that encountered a disaster, were forced to reinvent the product, and accidentally found what the market wanted but couldn't articulate. Slack started as an internal chat tool for a gaming company. Instagram began as an app for whiskey enthusiasts. YouTube was a dating site. The pattern is the same. The concept breaks against reality, and from the debris, something greater is born. Predator is the same case. It started as an action film. It became a horror movie. It was planned as a Schwarzenegger blockbuster by formula. It morphed into a deconstruction of the genre. The first act is a standard action flick. Tough guys, gunfire, explosions, macho humor. The second act flips the script. These tough guys become prey. Their weapons are useless. Their tactics don't work. Muscles won't save them. And the audience, expecting the usual adrenaline, finds themselves in a completely different film. McTiernan didn't plan this structure as a genre experiment. He was just trying to shoot what was in the script with the resources he had. The jungle dictated its terms. Darkness, limited visibility, claustrophobia among trees. The camera couldn't show the monster fully because the suit, even the new one, only looked convincing in fragments, flickering in the foliage, thermal vision, laser sights. The limitations became the language of the film. The fact that the Predator is almost invisible on screen for most of the runtime isn't a genius director's decision. It was a desperate attempt to hide the seams, and it worked. The audience feared what they couldn't see. Let's say the silence scared them more than the noise.
The invisible enemy turned out to be scarier than any monster on screen. Spielberg's Jaws operated on the same principle. The mechanical shark broke down, and the director was forced to show only the fin. The result, one of the scariest films in history. Predator accidentally repeated this trick. It's worth mentioning McTiernan separately. After Predator, he made Die Hard, 2 cult action films in a row from a guy who was hired because he was cheap. A career rise built on pure luck and talent that blossomed under pressure. McTiernan wouldn't have become McTiernan without the Mexican jungle, the broken suit, and the crumbling schedule. The crisis forced him to think not in templates, but in instincts. What came next is a separate and tragic story of personal downfall, which we'll revisit another time. Music. Alan Silvestri composed the score for Predator, the same Silvestri who would later create music for Forrest Gump and the Avengers. In 1987, he wasn't a legend. He was a working composer invited to a mid-tier project. His score,
Heavy drums, tense brass, the rhythm of the jungle became one of the most recognizable soundtracks of the decade. Silvestri later shared that he drew inspiration from the very conditions of the shoot, from tales of heat, illness, and the atmosphere of constant tension on set. Chaos shaped the tone of the film. The tone of the film shaped the music. The music cemented that tone in the memory of millions. Each element fed the other, not because someone designed this system, but because everything simmered in one pot. Look broader. Well, 1987, Predator hits theaters. Critics were lukewarm. Many saw it as just another action flick. Audiences thought differently. The film made good money and quickly became a cult hit on videocassette. The home video market was booming at that time, and Predator fit perfectly into the format. It was rewatched, quoted, dissected frame by frame. What seemed like disposable entertainment in theaters found a second life on VHS. Here's another parallel with business that's often overlooked. A product can flop in one distribution channel and explode in another. Predator wasn't the first or the last example. Films that barely broke even in theaters often became gold on home video. By then, the industry hadn't learned to predict this. Studios built forecasts based on box office receipts and regularly missed the mark. Well, who profited from this shift? Those who owned the rights to distribute videocassettes. To be honest, not the creators, not the director, not the actors, but the distributors. An alternative view of the market. While everyone was focused on opening weekend box office, real money flowed quietly through the shelves of video rentals, steadily, for years. The Predator as a character is a phenomenon in itself.
Its design, born from a casual conversation on a plane, turned out to be so powerful that it outlasted the film itself. Mandibles, dreadlocks, thermal vision, plasma cannon, invisibility. Each element is visually unique, instantly recognizable, and suitable for endless replication. Stan Winston didn't just create a suit, he created a brand, unknowingly. Compare it to other monsters of that era. Many faded into obscurity. The Predator remained, because its appearance both terrified and fascinated. It was beautiful in its alienness, not just a beast, a hunter with a code of honor, with technology, with rituals. All this layer of mythology grew after the film, from comics and sequels, but the seed was in the original. And it was planted by the people who were just trying to make sure that the monster didn't look silly on screen. Here's what's rarely discussed when talking about the film business. Luck isn't a bonus to talent. Sometimes luck is the only fuel. Predator could have remained a forgettable action flick with a cheap monster and a forgotten plot. The suit might not have broken down. Rel Winston might not have been called. Well, Cameron might not have mentioned the mandibles. Kevin Peter Hall might not have passed the audition. Each of these knots was a coincidence, and each turned out to be critical. Schwarzenegger later said that Predator is one of the films he is most proud of. Not The Terminator, not Commando, but this project where everything went wrong. Let's say maybe because he felt that the outcome wasn't guaranteed. They had to fight here, not on screen, but behind the scenes. The franchise after the original is a separate chapter. Predator 2 moved the action to the urban jungle of Los Angeles. Crossovers like Alien vs. Predator mixed two universes. Reboots and sequels were released with varying success. Prey, released in 2022, was surprisingly strong, restoring critical respect for the franchise. But none of the subsequent films replicated that alchemy of chaos that made the original special. Why? Because chaos can't be reproduced on demand.
You can hire the best writers, directors, and artists. You can allocate a huge budget. You can conduct dozens of focus groups, but you can't plan for a broken suit, a casual conversation on a plane, and Mexican dysentery that turns actors into hunted beasts, making their fear real. The industry doesn't like this truth. The industry wants formulas, predictability, reproducibility. That's why sequels are often worse than the originals, not because there are fewer people involved, but because there's less chaos. Control kills the magic. What does the CIA still hide? Nothing in the context of this film. But here's what the industry hides: that many of your favorite films are products not of genius, but of panic, not of vision, but of blind fumbling in the dark, not of strategy, but of improvisation on the edge of failure.
And this isn't a reason for disappointment. It's a reason for admiration. Because the people who create something great in complete chaos, they are no less heroes than Dutch with a gun in hand. They are true predators, hunters for results in a jungle where every step could be their last. And here's what was left out of this conversation. McTiernan, after 2 triumphs, fell into one of the strangest and darkest tales of personal downfall that Hollywood has known. The Thomas brothers, who created the original idea, tried to return to the franchise and faced a system that had outgrown them. Kevin Peter Hall, the man inside the suit, the one whose body became the predator, lived shortly after filming. Each of these stories deserves its own telling, and if this story resonated with you, we'll return to them, because the chaos that birthed Predator didn't end at the premiere in 1987. It was just getting started.